Hello, and welcome to the Power Tools for Coalitions webinar series. My name is Danae Schmidt. I am the Member Relations and Operations Manager at USBC, and I'm so glad to have you join us for this session. So the Power Tools series is organized as part of the USBC's training, technical assistance, and capacity building support for USBC's network of state, territorial, tribal, local, and cultural breastfeeding coalitions, community-based organizations, and national nonprofit organizations. Access to these webinars is free and open to anyone involved in building collaborative capacity to advance policy, systems, and environmental transformations in the first food field. We hope that these sessions bring ideas and inspiration. Webinar announcement emails are sent through USBC's Coalitions announcement list. To streamline access, these webinars have been set up as a series so that once you are registered, you'll receive announcements of each Power Tool sessions with the topic and speaker details. We understand that it's not possible to attend every single session, so all the webinars are recorded and archived so you can watch them at your convenience. For slides and handouts for this session, we will be uploading it to the GoToWebinar system. We will also be uploading it to our file library on our website. You can also access past recordings of previous sessions at usbreastfeeding.org/powertools. So to find the Power Tools webpage from our homepage, go to www.usbreastfeeding.org, click on the webinar tab, and the drop-down menu will show all of the webinar series that we host. Click on the Power Tools option, and it'll take you right to that webinar page. So for today's session, participants are in listen-only mode since we have a very large number of attendees and we need to keep the audio quality clear. However, we hope that this session will be as interactive as possible despite the virtual format. So we invite you to please share your insights and questions throughout the presentation. You can type your questions at any time during the webinar or raise your hand and we can try and unmute your line to ask that question. But the primary way is to go ahead and chat that question in the chat box. And here is how you do it. So go to your control panel on the right of your screen. If you don't see it, it may be minimized. Click on that orange tab and it should pop back out. If you scroll down below the audio section, you'll see a tab for questions. And when you click on it, it should open up a box for you to type in. Please look at your chat boxes as the presentation begins. We'll also try and post a couple of questions for you to consider as you listen to the presentation. If you have any audio or tech problems during this session, please send an email to coalitions@usbreastfeeding.org and we will try to assist you. We do recommend if you're having any audio issues to try switching your audio to the phone. Typically, if you're having Wi-Fi issues, it will affect your computer audio. And that brings me to today's topic, designing evaluations for systems change. Is your organization or coalition engaging in initiatives to create major systems change? Is your organization looking for a way to ensure these initiatives are adaptable and responsive to and adaptable to change conditions? Then developmental evaluation may be a framework for your organization to use. The purpose of developmental evaluation is to inform and support innovative and adaptive processes. It is the process of asking evaluative questions and gathering and reporting data to support intervention customization based on rapid feedback. During today's session, we will learn about the development evaluation framework and explore how it is useful in helping to support more nimble initiatives. I am delighted to have Dr. Kimberly Broomfield-Massey present this session today. She is a very skilled facilitator and partners with USBC in facilitating the lactation support providers constellation. Dr. Broomfield-Massey has worked as a program evaluation consultant with MSTAR since 1998. With degrees from the University of Central Florida and Georgia State University, Dr. Broomfield Massey completed her doctoral work in the field of community psychology with a focus in program evaluation. Her work with the Georgia Campaign for Pregnancy Prevention and the Center for Black Women's Wellness sparked an interest in issues around perinatal health. She currently evaluates the Atlanta Healthy Start Initiative, a federally funded program implemented by the Center for Black Women's Wellness, Inc., whose goal is to address disparities in perinatal health by removing barriers to adequate health care for pregnant women and parenting mothers with infants under the age of 2. In addition to her work around youth development and perinatal health, she has also worked with such organizations as Tapestry, Inc., the American Cancer Society, and the United Way. Dr. Broomfield Massey's academic and occupational experiences continue to fuel her passion for working with community-based organizations and desire to empower disenfranchised communities. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Danae. Let me make sure you can see my screen. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you perfect.
Fantastic. And so hopefully you'll see my screen and hopefully you will see the correct slideshow. Is it showing up okay, or is it showing up the other way?
We see it in the with the presenter notes version.
That's what I thought. I'm having a little technical difficulty with that right now. Let me see if I can fix that. But in the interim, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I know everyone is so busy, and so the fact that you made it onto this webinar today makes me really happy. So today what I want to talk to you guys about is a very specific niche in evaluation called developmental evaluation. And so, as Danae said, I've been working in the field since 1998. As my son likes to say, Mommy, you started working and then you were born in the 19s, since now we're in like 2000. So I've been working in evaluation since the 19s, and developmental evaluation was something that's relatively new. And to be quite honest, when I first heard about it, I was a little skeptical because, you know, in many fields, people try to reinvent the wheel. And so I thought to myself, what is this developmental evaluation and what makes it different than all the other types of evaluation? And so for those of you who aren't as familiar with evaluation, there are over 100 types of evaluation in the field. There's like utilization focus, there's real world evaluation. There's so many types of evaluation. So my biggest question was always, what makes this so different? So today I'm going to talk to you some about what makes this so different than general evaluation. And so we'll start with the first slide that says evaluation. I feel like it needs background music, like dun, dun, dun. Usually when people hear the word evaluation or evaluator, it like strikes fear in their hearts. Like, this person is coming, they're going to come judge me, they're going to tell me all the things that I'm doing wrong. But in my mind, evaluation is purely storytelling. It's going into an organization, it's finding out what they want for themselves, and it's being able to tell their story and to tell their story to them so that they can understand what's happening within their organizations and within their programs, and to be able to tell their story to the outside world. Okay? And so with that framework of storytelling, which is what I like to do, but the way I like to describe it, developmental evaluation really is different. It's different in that the evaluator is not just going in, learning about the organization and telling the organization's story. They're going in and they're helping to co-create the story. And so Developmental evaluation is truly an evaluation niche, and the term was coined by Michael Quinn Patton in the early 2000s, and it is very different than traditional evaluation options. So when you think of traditional evaluation options, there is formative evaluation and then there is summative evaluation. Those are the two big buckets that evaluators typically put evaluation in. And in formative evaluation, that's the piece that we typically use at the beginning of the program and during program implementation to really provide feedback to the program so that they can understand what they can do to improve the program. Whereas summative evaluation is what's usually conducted at the end of the program, and they use the data is used by the evaluator to make an overall judgment of merit or worth of the program. So does this program work, yes or no? Should it go on, yes or no? Summative evaluation is about testing the effects of the program or the intervention, and is usually used to support major decisions about whether a program should continue and in what ways the program will continue. But what's also interesting about these more traditional evaluation options is that the evaluator is more so seen as the expert or kind of the outsider that collects the data and analyzes the data and provides input on how well the program or the intervention is doing. Sorry about that. Got a alert coming up. Now, developmental evaluation is different. So the purpose of evaluation, developmental evaluation, is to inform and support innovative and adaptive development in complex and dynamic environments. Now that is a mouthful. The purpose of the development evaluation is also to provide real-time feedback from the beginning to the end of a project. So it allows you to continue to develop a program, adapt it to changing conditions. And so developmental evaluation is really important for programs that want to continue to develop rather than to stabilize or standardize an intervention or a model. And that development will occur in relation to the changes in the environment and also increases in knowledge or learning that happens within the program. And so that's why real-time feedback is so important when it comes to developmental evaluation, because what we want to do is to assist people who are innovators in developing social change initiatives and use data to guide adaptation to emerging and dynamic realities in complex environments. And so, as I said, this is a mouthful, but what it really means is you have someone who goes in and listens to what this innovator is doing and helps them to tell their story, but very quickly provides them with feedback because the environments within which their intervention is based tends to change or is very complex. So you have to deal with a number of complex stakeholders. And so within this developmental evaluation framework, the evaluator is not necessarily the expert, but it's a facilitator. The evaluator is a facilitator, someone who is helping to conceptualize, to design, and test new approaches in an ongoing process of continuous improvement, adaptation, and change. So the developmental evaluator is embedded in the initiative as a member of the team, and her primary role is to clarify team discussions with evaluative questions, data, and logic, and facilitate data-based assessments and decision-making in the unfolding and developmental process of innovation. And so According to Michael Quinn Patton, who developed developmental evaluation, I love this quote because what he says is developmental evaluation will help you be clear about where you started, what forks in the road you took and why, what you learned along the way, and where you ended up, at least for this moment in time. And so, with that being said, I know I said a mouthful, but I found a really interesting video online that I wanted to share with you guys that was done by Dr. Quinn Patton, talking about how he developed developmental evaluation, how developmental evaluation actually emerged. And so I would like everybody to take their time and listen. It's a long clip, so I want to warn you in advance. It is a long clip, but the example is so clear and so salient that I feel like it's really important for your understanding to hear this so that you can move forward in this talk. And in addition, I know that our USBC facilitators are going to be also emailing out this link so everyone can have access to it. So hold on one second while I turn on this video.
Has a clear theory of change, it has a logic model, doable, then it's ready for summative evaluation. And formative and summative evaluation from the beginning were joined hand in glove. They remain the primary distinctions in the field. For years, I ran a research and evaluation center at the University of Minnesota, and virtually all of our contracts were for formative and summative evaluation. 3-year contracts, a year and a half of formative, followed by a year and a half of summative. 5-year contracts, 2.5 a year formative, followed by 2.5 years of summative. And so it was in that context that I was doing an evaluation in northern Minnesota of a program from the Blandin Foundation called the Blandin Community Leadership Program that took people from small rural communities and Native American reservations and took them through an intensive 7-day residential experience where they learned to do strategic planning for their communities. They learned to cover things around community engagement, communications, how to deal with community indicators. They got their Myers-Briggs scores so they knew who they were. They worked together on small group dynamics. And this was a hugely transformative experience for these rural folks, most of whom had never gone through anything approaching such intensive professional development. And I had a contract to do 2.5 years of formative evaluation, followed by 2.5 years of summative, because there was a lot of national interest in this leadership model and in what its impacts were at both the community level and at the individual leader level. And it was a great group of folks to work with, the program director, the major staff, the funders, the people in the foundation, the president of the foundation, some university faculty who were on their advisory group, were the steering committee that I worked with. I met with them quarterly, gave them feedback about the formative findings. We were following up to see what kinds of projects people were doing, what they were using from what they learned, getting feedback about the retreats themselves, interviewing key informants about how they viewed them when they came back, examining through case studies the work that they did. And they used that information and changed and adapted the program based upon that feedback. And on a cold February morning, it was actually a blizzard, and about this time of year in northern Minnesota, after 2.5 years of formative evaluation, I met with the steering committee to make the transition to summative evaluation. And I expressed appreciation for such a wonderful experience of working with people who are hungry for information. They weren't resistant. They wanted to improve the program. They enjoyed improving the program. They weren't defensive about the weaknesses that we turned up. And then I said, and now we're moving into 2.5 years of summative evaluation, and you can't make any more changes to the program. Because when you go to answer the summative question, does it work, you have to have a stable, fixed it. It's called the it issue in evaluation, in our technical jargon. The it question is, what is the it that works or doesn't work? And if people keep changing the it all the time, you can't make a summative judgment. So I said, from now on, for the next 2.5 years, you're going to implement this program the way it's currently designed, based upon the formative feedback. Keep it standardized. Everybody will go through the same set of experiences, and then we'll see what the overall effects are. And the program director, who I'd gotten to know fairly well, looked at me with unusual hostility and said, but we've learned we can't stop changing the program. And I explained again formative and summative, and why summative needed to be a fixed intervention so that we'd know what the it was. And he said, no, you're not understanding. What we've learned is we have to keep changing the program because the world around us is changing. We can't have a fixed curriculum because Minnesota is caught in a boom and bust cycle in agriculture, and immigrants are moving from the city out into rural areas and changing the demography. And every time there's an election, there's new policies and procedures put into place. And we have to update the curriculum to deal with changed policies at the state level, at the county level, at the federal level. And technology is changing. I was doing this work before there were cell phones and before there was the internet, but there were hints of this stuff that was going to come. And already people were beginning to get a sense that rural communities would be deeply affected by changed communications, and that they would have to be updating things, that the stuff that was going on with young people was changing, the music was changing. Their communication with each other was changing. They were trying to keep young people in their rural communities. Everything around them, the demography, the politics, the economy, the society was changing. And they said, how in the world, in the face of all that, that's what we've been learning and hearing from people, could we have a fixed curriculum? And then he looked at me with even greater hostility and said, formative evaluation, summative evaluation, is that all you people have? And as my evaluation colleagues here know, that pretty much is what we had. Those were the biggies. Those were the distinctions we made. And I felt quite defensive, and I said, well, we could if you were to. I mean, we'd have to change the contract, and the board would have to approve it and really think through what this is about. But, we could if you wanted to. Now, we shouldn't make a sudden decision here, but we could engage in developmental evaluation. And he said, what's that? I said, that's where you keep developing. And he said, that's what we want to do. Why didn't you mention that earlier? And that's the true story of how this emerged. So I'm greatly sympathetic to social innovators who find things emerging out of engagement, because this emerged in response to a client who needed something different than what I had to offer at that time.
All right. So it emerged, developmental evaluation emerged out of a need to keep the context as part of the evaluation. And so based on the example that he gave, you saw that he talked about the need of that he had the formative evaluation that he was conducting consistently with his clients. And when it came time to do the summative evaluation, where they had to measure the quote unquote it, then it became a problem because the program understood that the context strongly impacted the type of innovation or the type of implementation that had to be done. And so that is how developmental evaluation was birthed. So developmental evaluation, as I said earlier, hopefully that illustration helped to put some context around the verbiage that I used earlier. And so developmental evaluation focuses on development. It doesn't necessarily focus on improvement. It doesn't focus on judgment making. It focuses on how the program or how your intervention can be nimble enough so that it can be effective based on what is happening in the context. Developmental evaluation is important because it is important in complex and dynamic environments. In environments that don't change as much, formative and summative evaluations are very appropriate. But when you're in an environment or when you're implementing a program that is new, it's important to be able to be nimble and to be able to have a quick turnaround time. So feedback will have to be rapid. And as I mentioned earlier, your evaluator will work collaboratively with your program developers to conceptualize, design, and test approaches in a long-term kind of ongoing process that helps to make adaptations to the environment, to make adaptation as a result of the environment, make changes that will positively impact whether it's individuals you're working with or your systems that you're trying to influence, and also to develop the program. The developmental evaluator can be part of the intervention team, but it can also be an outside person. And the evaluator's primary function is to really clarify and elucidate the innovation and adaptation process, to track implications and results, and to facilitate ongoing, real-time, database decision-making in the developmental process. So developmental evaluation becomes actually a part of the intervention. So it's no longer a stand aside where you just tell the story. It's you or your organization using real-time data to see how your interventions are making an impact or are making a difference in the area that you need it to. So now, developmental evaluation is not for everyone. This is not a catch-all for every program, for every intervention, for every collaborative. It's more so, according to Michael Patton and some other developmental evaluators, they recommend that developmental evaluation be done for people who are social innovators and they're working to solve systems level issues. So as we know, when you're dealing with systems level issues, you have to be aware of the context, and you know that the context and the milieu is continually changing. And so what you need to do is to be able to have an evaluation that looks at what is planned, what is intended, what got left behind, what you're able to do, what had to be changed. So yeah, thinking about being nimble. In addition, developmental evaluation is good for newly formed or forming organizations that are responding to a specific issue or exploring an idea that has not fully taken shape. Because developmental evaluation allows an organization the bandwidth to be able to set smaller goals for themselves and then measure what is happening in a quick turnaround time. And when I say quick turnaround time, it could be quarterly. As many of you who have an evaluator or work with evaluators know, it's usually semi-annually or annually that you do a lot of reporting. And so developmental evaluation, you want more real-time information, and you want to be able to be in contact with the people who are your stakeholders. Evaluation is also important for organizations that are in a changing context, so where more traditional approaches have become ineffective because the context has changed and now there's a need to explore alternatives. It's a perfect opportunity to do a time-limited developmental evaluation. Developmental evaluation is also important or good for organizations that are open to diverse perspectives and also open to ambiguity, because there are going to be times that you implement an innovation or implement a program and you're not sure which way to go. You see that maybe it's not working and you're looking around for your levers for change, but you and your evaluators and your stakeholders work collaboratively to find out what can be done. Finally, a developmental evaluation is also fits well within organizations that have a culture suited for exploration and inquiry. And every organization is not well suited for exploration and inquiry. And so there are three key features to a development organization, to a developmental evaluation. Now, this is coming from the developmental primer that was done by Jamie Gamble. It's an excellent resource, and I would suggest that anyone who is interested in learning more about developmental evaluation pick this book up. It's free. Actually, it's not even a book. You can get it online. It's free. It's a free resource, and it's very user-friendly, and it's wonderful. And so I'm quoting some from the developmental evaluation primer that talks about the three key features of a developmental evaluation. So one, the purpose of the developmental evaluation is to frame the issue. So the developmental evaluation will support the innovators in their conceptualization and articulation of the problem by helping them to frame the issue, but not just frame the issue, but frame the dynamics. So again, attention is paid to not only what the issue is and what the intervention is going to be, but also the context within which the intervention and the problem exists. Another key feature is testing quick iterations. Again, it's being systematic about testing and testing different innovations or different programs, and interpreting the data to see the consequences of these new programs. And so developmental evaluation brings a measure of rigor to the learning generated with experiments. So when you start a new program, people try new things and they test feedback loops and they try to understand the perspectives about changing needs and demands in the milieu. And so as programs roll out, leaders intuitively make observations and refinements. And in developmental evaluation, those observations and refinements are documented. They are documented by the evaluator within the framework of meetings, using meeting notes, using surveys, using interviews. And then finally, a final feature of developmental evaluation is tracking the trajectory of an innovation. And so when you hear about developmental evaluation, this is typically what's talked about. And this is where I talk about the co-creation of the story, because part of what happens in tracking the trajectory of the innovation is that the evaluator and the innovators work together to document the steps taken, but also document what wasn't taken and why it wasn't taken. They document what the intended and unintended consequences are. So if you think about it and compare it to your typical summative evaluation, it again has an attention to context. It looks at not just what you were supposed to do or what outcomes were supposed to happen, but what are some other things that happened that you didn't plan for. And so, again, it helps your program to be more nimble, and it looks at not only what was done, but also the roads that were not taken. And so in it makes your decision making. It makes the decision making along the path more transparent, and it generates valuable data for dissemination long term, particularly since you're working in an innovative field. When you're working in an innovation, you want to be able to document the decisions that you're making. Typically, when you're working in an innovative field and you're trying to make systems level change, people are working so quickly, there's no one there to really do the documentation. And then if something works well, then where's the documentation of the decision-making process? Well, if you think through and you have a developmental evaluation, you will have someone, your evaluator, who is there with you from the beginning to help you think through your processes, but also document your changes. And so in developmental evaluation, your evaluator helps you make a decision by implementing several inquiry frameworks. So pretty much it gives, your evaluator helps you to think through the decisions that you're making using a set of evaluation grounded questions. And so descriptive, so in the beginning, again, if you look at it, it sounds like storytelling, right? In the beginning, it looks at they ask descriptive questions to get an understanding of the situation, right? What is happening? Why is it happening? When did it start? How is it come to be? Where is it happening? And with whom? Another framework of inquiry would be questions linking the evaluative analysis, interpretation, and action. So what was done, right? And what happened as a result to what was done? And then now what? What are we going to do based on the information that we have? And it's important for me to really underscore the fact that although these questions are there, a lot of these questions are going to be answered using both qualitative and quantitative data that is being collected by your evaluator and also by your team. Another evaluation inquiry framework would be questions focusing on identifying the organizational learning over time. And how could this learning be used to support and inform ongoing development? So what have you learned as a result of making change? How can you use those learnings to make better decisions, to inform other contexts? Sorry. We also encourage asking questions aiming to identify the organization's strengths and positive assets. And so a lot of times in evaluation, there is a deficit focus. What I appreciate about developmental evaluation is that it has a strength focus, and it also has a focus on ensuring that a number of stakeholders are at the table. We also encourage, so when doing a developmental evaluation, the other questions that are placed onto the intervention are questions focusing on identifying the root cause of problems by identifying perspectives, boundaries, and interrelationships. We're also going to have questions assessing collaboration for innovation. So who are you collaborating with? Are the people who are at the table, are all the necessary people at the table who need to be at the table? And if they aren't, how do we go back and change that and ensure that they are? And then finally, another inquiry framework is just value-driven questions that focus on assessing how things are being done. So not just what is being done, but how is it being done? And so it looks like process evaluation to some degree, but it's not. And so with that, what I want to talk about next are myths about developmental evaluation, several of which I had, admittedly, So the one myth is that developmental evaluation should replace all other evaluations. The answer to this is a resounding no. Developmental evaluation is not appropriate for all situations. It's not superior, it's not inferior to formative or summative evaluation. It's in addition to it should be used in addition to the other evaluation approaches. So it's important for you guys to understand, like, developmental evaluation is good in those certain contexts that we talked about earlier, in dynamic settings, in innovative settings, when you're trying to make systems change, but not necessarily to replace formative and summative evaluation. Another myth, which is what I had admittedly, was that it was about soft methods. But what I found in my research and in my foray into developmental evaluation is that it is rigorous. It is as rigorous as any evaluative process. And you're able, so developmental evaluation is just a framework, just like formative evaluation and just like summative evaluation. It's a way to help your clients or to help organizations think evaluatively about what they are doing. And so it really, in my mind, will end up resulting in stronger programming and more nimble programming. Another myth is it's about collecting stories. And so while story collecting is a big part of it, it's not the only part of it. Developmental evaluation involves both qualitative and quantitative methods, and it's important to have those other methods in addition to the storytelling so that you can use metrics and use the lived experience as well as the context to be able to make decisions about how to effectively make systems change. Some people think that developmental evaluation is process evaluation, but it's not. The ultimate focus is actually on results. It's on results in a quick time frame. Process is attended to because we want to know about how things are being implemented, but the development is to move the program or move the intervention forward so that a positive outcome is the ultimate objective. So outcome information is not counter to developmental evaluation, but it actually informs developmental evaluation. Another myth is that developmental evaluation downplays accountability. However, the accountability of developmental evaluation rests in its ability to support development. So if nothing is developed, then it has failed. Then there is no accountability. But because developmental evaluation is this constant learning cycle, that is where the accountability lies. It is a constant looping around of information. It is a constant scanning of the environment, and it's a constant analysis of the effectiveness of interventions. Finally, the final myth that is listed in the primer is that developmental evaluation is the same as participatory evaluation. That is also a myth because participatory evaluation is about a distinct approach, where developmental evaluation is about a purpose. So participatory approaches can be used to inform summative, formative, and developmental evaluation. But developmental evaluation is oriented to supporting early stage innovations in complex environments. And so while a participatory approach is important, the purpose of developmental evaluation is to encourage participation of all important stakeholders. So one important thing that I also wanted to highlight is that developmental evaluation creates change in a different way. And so when you think about our formal ways of having, evidence-based practice, and so we evaluate these programs and we evaluate these interventions because we want to find out what works so that we can replicate it and bring it to scale, because so we can find out what the best practices are. But when you look at that way of being, not that it's a wrong way, it's a great way to be. However, when you look at it that way, it takes attention away from context, and it doesn't allow for a lot of customization of programmings, wherein developmental evaluation uses kind of a bottoms-up adaptive management model as opposed to top-down. So if you think about evidence-based practice, that's top-down. Okay, we found these 3 strategies that work well. We want to bring them to scale, and we want to implement them across 15 different states. Whereas developmental evaluation is truly a unique process and is truly unique to the programs that it's working within. So developmental evaluation is helping to find instead of finding what the best practices are, it looks at what are the best kind of approaches, and it allows for customization, and it looks more at theory pieces as opposed to, very prescribed and regimented and fidelity-oriented ways of being. And so finally, I was thinking a lot about, clearly I've been thinking a lot about developmental evaluation. And I was like, I don't know. I have one very clear example where I do developmental evaluation, and that's in my work with the LSP constellation with USBC. But I was thinking about my work with my smaller nonprofit organizations, and I realized that there are ways to do a time-limited developmental evaluation. So, for example, as was mentioned earlier, I do evaluation for a Healthy Start Project. And with Healthy Start Project, that's all about health equity, and it's all about ensuring that that women and families, have positive birth outcomes. And so overall, I'm working with this Healthy Start. Overall, everything is going well. And we're finding that there are increases in family planning and increases in women using their birth control and increases in women breastfeeding. However, we're finding that there are decreases in postpartum visits. And so we start to see like a very severe drop off in our postpartum visits. And so, using a developmental evaluation framework, what I did was go in and look at, what did we plan to do? We have a way of engaging with mom to ensure that she gets her postpartum visits. Then we looked at, was it getting done properly? Yes, it was getting done properly. So then what was the problem? Why were we seeing this sharp decrease in postpartum visits? And so that's where it became imperative for us to involve the other stakeholders that impact the mom-baby dyad. So it was important for engagement of physicians and the local hospital that most of our moms delivered. It was important for us, most importantly, was to talk to our moms and to find out, okay, what's going on? Why haven't you gone to get your postpartum visits? And what we started finding was that moms were getting their birth control, their family planning before they were discharged. And so that was decreasing rates of postpartum visits. In addition to that, we were finding that that moms were having issues getting to the to the hospital or back to the doctor for her postpartum visits, whether it was related to financial barriers or related to childcare issues or even related to scheduling the postpartum visits. So what ended up happening was that we decided to engage with our partner physicians and partner hospitals to actually have the physicians talk to mom also about the importance of postpartum visits. We also went to the moms and had moms to inform other moms about the importance of postpartum visits. And then we started to see increases happen. And that's like developmental evaluation on a small scale. On a larger scale, developmental evaluation is happening within USBC with our work with the LSP constellations. And, quite honestly, I believe developmental evaluation informally is happening throughout all the constellations. Because if you think about just the framework of what a constellation is a group of organizations coming together to collaboratively decide on what the outcome is going to be. So if you think, I'm going to go back to our, here we go. I'm going to go back to, here we go, not for everyone. So if you think about a lot of our constellations are newly formed or forming organizations or bodies responding to a specific issue or exploring an idea that has not fully taken shape. And so if you think about it, all of the notes that are taken in constellations, that is a part of a developmental evaluation. All of the decisions that are being made, everything that is documented in the work of the constellations can be aggregated and added on to make a very robust developmental evaluation. And so those are two examples that I have of developmental evaluation in the field. But I would like to encourage everyone to definitely think about developmental evaluation. Oh, I'm sorry about the background noise. Think about developmental evaluation as a method for understanding and evaluating your innovative programs. And with that, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was a terrific presentation. It's very evident from what you discussed that developmental evaluation provides feedback to inform adaptive development of change initiatives and complex dynamic environments. So we know that our coalitions and other nonprofit organizations are working on complex and adaptive issues, and developmental evaluation could be a very innovative and powerful approach to their evaluation approach. So we do have some questions. You mentioned that developmental evaluation is about telling and collecting stories. So it sounds like developmental evaluation requires some significant level of documentation, such as program progression and decision making. Can you provide some tips for managing that documentation efficiently, as well as tips to avoid possible burnout when collecting that data?
Absolutely. And so the thing about developmental evaluation is part of it is collecting stories, but part of it is looking at more quantifiable data. And so one tip that I would have everyone to do is to engage your stakeholders, engage the people who are doing the work, have them to start to think about what are the interesting things that are happening with this program, and begin to help, with the observation. So think about, as you're doing the work, take a little time out to make some process observations, to have discussions, or just do some notation on points of tension. think about what some of the implicit decisions are, and what are some of the assumptions, and what are some like emerging themes and patterns. That kind of takes people away from the everyday kind of drudgery of note taking and helps them to think critically. So I would definitely encourage people to, take time to take a step back and engage in some critical thinking, and also maybe come up together as a group, try to find ways to develop evidence of, or develop indicators of how you know your process is working. So, again, instead of writing down every single thing that happens in a meeting, you can have a fun meeting. Well, I'm an evaluator, so I would think it was fun. Sorry. But have a fun meeting about how do we know that this is working? What do we want to see? What are some indicators that this process is working? Or what are some indicators that it's not working? So to me, because I think that one way to get away from the drudgery is to go up and take like a 50,000 foot view of what's happening, as opposed to doing it every day, the everyday work.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If someone's interested in getting trained in developmental evaluation, where are some places to begin? Are there any resources that you can point us to, or anything like that?
Absolutely. There is a fantastic website called betterevaluations.com. I love it. And if you go to betterevaluations.com, what you can do is you can do a search on developmental evaluation, and they have a host of resources, free resources that are available. The man that I showed you guys, Michael Quinn Patton, from where developmental evaluation emerged. He wrote a book on developmental evaluation. He also informed a book called The Developmental Evaluation Primer by Jamie Gamble. I thought it was an excellent book, very user-friendly, very easy to understand. So those are two great places to start. If you are in the States, there's also the American Evaluation Association. You can always go online. They have plenty of resources online. You would be surprised to know that in Canada, they have a very strong evaluation group, and there are a lot of evaluation resources online based out of Canada. So those are some places that you can go to start learning about developmental evaluation. And of course, YouTube. You can learn everything on YouTube.
Thanks so much, Kim. So you mentioned that developmental evaluation is not for everyone, and I think you mentioned a few indicators for whether an organization or a program is appropriate for that. Do you mind just covering that one more time as far as like what those key indicators would be?
Absolutely. So one thing, if your organization, so I'm going to actually reference the developmental. So if you guys have a paper and pencil, I would definitely want you to look at the Developmental Evaluation Primer, because they have a whole rubric and assessment tools to see if your organization is ready for innovation and developmental evaluation. So, that is one good place to start. But also what I mentioned was, developmental evaluation is for social innovators, not necessarily for people who have a specific kind of rubric that they use, and they want to stick with the rubric and they feel like that this best practice is working for them, then developmental evaluation is not something that you want to use. It's really for people who are trying something new, or are finding that what they're using is not working as well as it used to work. Another environment that's really good for developmental organization are newly formed or forming organizations. So people that are responding to an issue that are brand new, or people who are exploring an idea that's not fully taken shape. Again, people who are still trying to find their way. They kind of know what they want, but they don't know exactly. So using that example of the constellations. So a lot of constellations, have an overarching goal, but don't know exactly how to get there. And so those are the kind of people that are really good for developmental organizations, developmental evaluations, organizations that are in a changing context. So people that have to really adjust and adapt to environmental changes, contextual changes, whether it be the government, whether it be local, state, or federal government, whether it's demographics. So if you have an organization that typically serves Latinos, but now you have an influx of, African Americans or Asian Americans, how are you going to deal with that to shift your program so that you're creating something that works well for your population? It's also effective for people who are open to diverse perspectives. It's not good for people who don't deal well with ambiguity. If your organization or your program or your leaders don't do well with I don't know, or I'm not sure, or let's figure it out, developmental or evaluation is not for
you. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So someone says Leslie says we may be doing a collective impact project for maternal health in our city and may be able to convene stakeholders during an upcoming conference. Do you have suggestions for a process we might use in a 1-hour time frame to help surface top issues, concerns, and ideas?
Oh, absolutely. So if you're doing a convening of stakeholders, and it's within a specific, you said it was within a city or a state?
Yes, it's in their city, and they have a 1-hour time frame.
And they have a 1-hour time frame. So what I would do is to really come up with, first, I would send out a survey ahead of time. Send out a survey ahead of time, 1 or 2 questions tops. One question is asking, what are your top needs related to maternal and child health in your community, period. They can define community however they need to. Also, asking them about the resources that they have available to make change in their community. Because what you want people to start thinking about is not just what's the problem, so they're looking to you to fix it, but what's the problem? This is what we have, and also these are our strengths. So I would ask them those 3 questions, right? What are the major issues? What are our strengths? What are we doing well related to maternal and child health? And what are the resources that you have to put into creating the change that you want to see? And even if you can get them to articulate the change that they want to see. Now, that 4th question, the change that you want to see, that's something that you can facilitate when you have them all in the room. But what I would suggest you do is get people to answer those few questions. If they can email them to you ahead of time, even better, because then you can organize your conversation around what the issues are, and you can ask people in the meeting to help you do your needs assessment. So some people in that room are going to have access to data from your Department of Public Health or the census or what have you. So I would start to get people's juices flowing. If you only have an hour, you start to get people thinking before they walk into the room. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you. And Leslie says that was very helpful. We do have one more question, and then we're going to move into some updates about National Breastfeeding Month. But the last question we have is, are there any tips on making evaluation less scary for individuals or orgs who aren't particularly comfortable using it?
Yes, this is for general evaluations, right? First, I would encourage you to use my framework, and you is like the general everybody, to use my framework of storytelling. Like, if you explain to people that what you're trying to do is tell their story, usually the defenses come down. Another way I like to frame up evaluation is it's allowing me to tell the world about all the hard work that you do. Many of us work. So I'm speaking just in generalities. I've worked with small and medium-sized nonprofits for quite a while now. And I found that when I walk in the door, people aren't exactly overjoyed to see me, even though I am so much fun. But I tell people that I sit down and I listen to what they do. And I think that's the most important thing to do is if you are an evaluator or if you are looking for an evaluator, you have to find someone who is willing to sit down and understand the culture and the context within the work that's being done before they come in talking giving all of their expertise. And when they understand how individuals do their work, then they can frame an evaluation that's not so intrusive and not so difficult and not so scary.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kim, for just a wealth of information. Yeah, wealth of information you provided us around developmental evaluation. It's really grounded in systems thinking and can be used for a range of purposes. And so we hope that this content was helpful to everyone. We are going to move into some updates. As you all know, National Breastfeeding Month is just a few weeks away. And so I'm going to invite Camille Abbey, our Events and Public Relations Manager, to share updates.
Thank you so much, Danae. And thank you so much, Kimberly. It is always a treat to hear your voice, to be in your presence, even if I'm here in Massachusetts and not with you, and to learn from you. It just makes my heart feel really warm and good, and my mind is active, so I appreciate you. Thanks everyone for hanging on the line. 3 quick slides to celebrate and inform a little bit about National Breastfeeding Month. Support changes everything is our theme. You've probably read that in the Weekly Wire these past few editions and perhaps on social media. There's a lot going on this month, as I'm sure you all well know. Week 1, the theme orientation is Empowered Parents and Partners. That comes from the World Breastfeeding Week theme, which is the first week of the month. Then we go into the second week, which is Investing in Our Future. Week 3 is Workplace and Work Life, and that please definitely includes school life. A lot of folks balancing parenting and college or high school. Really important that we recognize their balance and their work and their efforts. And week 4 is Black Breastfeeding Week. The theme of the week is listed on the Facebook page, The World is Yours, Imagine, Innovate, and Liberate. So those are the 4 themes for the week. If you could pop to the next slide for me, please, Danae. And we want to let you know that we have a lot of resources and tools, action tools, information webinars from USBC and from many partners from whom we've already been collecting on the usbreastfeeding.org website. It's /NBM19. So it's a super easy website. So check it out. And please know that we are soliciting for more information. We'll have that link in 1 second. So anything that your coalition, your organization is doing during National Breastfeeding Month, we want to hear from you. This is not a one-way street. This is how we get things done. It's collectively. So if you're looking at the screen, you'll see there's a really lovely graphic up with the support changes everything image. This is for social media for sharing. We have that available on the website as well, so you can click a link and share away. Please do. And we also have a Cafe Press store, which has posters, postcards, greeting cards. Many of you saw the t-shirts that a lot of folks were wearing if you came to the conference that say support changes everything as well. And they're very quick with their turnaround. So if you have a bulletin board or an event or something that you'd like to plan ahead for, please feel free to click over to the USBC Cafe Press store and check it out. You have plenty of time to order and have things in time for August if you do it, relatively soon. Next slide, please. So couple ways to connect and participate. We obviously have some hashtags. NBM19 and support changes everything are our two hashtags. As I mentioned, we do really invite and request that you please submit your resources, your tools, your events, what's going on this month. Particularly, help us, help you, tell us the week that you are, if it's an event, obviously we need to know the date, but if it's something organized around one of the themes, help us with that. Share that with us via the submit tool. And then also always, if you are not already signed up for our news and action alerts, please do sign up on the website at the sign up link so that you can stay in touch, receive the wire, and connect with us, because that's how we are all able to make this collective change together. So we're really looking forward to connecting with all of you in the next few weeks as we lead in and then carry forth on National Breastfeeding Month. And thank you all so much for participating and engaging with us on that. I think that's all from me. Pass it back to you, Danae.
Thank you. All right, and that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you again, Kim, for spending time with us today and really bringing just so much information around evaluation. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this session and for all that you do to improve the landscape of breastfeeding support. Please complete the webinar evaluation. We read your suggestions and bring speakers and topics that are important to you. And those who complete the evaluation do get a certificate of attendance. So we will see you next time virtually, and I look forward to having you all for the next Power Tools webinar session. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.